You're watching Beyond Market. Welcome. I'm Esther Awuni. Many thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll discuss what Nigerians expect from the next 4 years as President Buhari's second term in office takes shape. You can join today's conversation with the hashtag Beyond Market, and you can send tweets to my Twitter handle too, at Esther O. Awuni. Now, will the next 4 years of President Buhari's administration be business as usual? And can the government make the much-needed bold reforms to set the country on the right growth trajectory? My guests today join me to share their thoughts. Muda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Kyari, Bukar, former chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, are with me in the studio for this discussion. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
So we're at that point where we're about to, begin another 4 years of the President Buhari administration. The Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, the ERGP, is the economic blueprint, and we've been told that it will continue to build on that. At the heart of it is to diversify the economy, to increase the tax base, get more revenue for the government, create more jobs, etc., etc. Kyari, let me start with you. So as we begin this next 4 years, there's been a lot of talk about this being an opportunity to make hard choices, tough decisions. We may only get one chance to do it. The economic growth is still slow. It's still at around 2%. Where should we start?
We should start, of course, by clearly looking for the right sets of hands or resources that would execute the plan. The plan in of itself is not bad. The adage of saying if you can get a half-decent plan executed fairly well, you would actually still win in the game. If, however, you have a terrible plan, even if you get the best implementers or best team to execute, you would end up somewhere else rather than where you intend to be. So the plan as it is decent. The only problem is that we did not have the right hands to execute the plans well. So now the key is how, and the expectation, at least in the market or at least in the country, is that the second outing of President Buhari is going to be different. And if that's true, then some of the analysts would be put to shame, right? Because we will then get the plans executed fairly well. And, when you look at the economy as it is quite diverse. The problem is that what the government gets from the economy, meaning call it royalty fees, taxes, or whatever, it is tilted towards one or two segments of the economy. Oil and gas, for example, is only 8% of the GDP. But oil and gas, when it comes to revenue to the government, is like 70%. So the economy is skewed to the extent that as diverse as the economy is, the where government gets its revenues is tilted to other segments. So what we need to do is create in the areas where government is not getting a lot of taxes, to create that enabling environment so that more and more people come into the tax net willingly. And of course, payment of taxes is the law anyway. But what I'm saying is that there are certain things that have been done elsewhere where the total tax collections, the number of entities paying taxes have grown by a number of folds. For example, in Korea in the 80s and so on and so forth. We can do something similar here as well. The SMEs, even in the agric space, or even though agric itself is not a taxable endeavor, but there is a value added. In that value chain, there are value-add food processing and all of that can create a lot of jobs and at the same time be the place where taxes can be collected.
And Muda, let me bring you in here. Kyari made some very good points, and key for this government will be revenue generation, outside of the oil sector. We know that the government has tried to reform the tax system, make it more effective and more efficient, and to bring more people into the tax bracket. Tax to GDP, sadly, 4 years later, is still quite low. And I know that, from the NESG to some other groups, there have been a lot of efforts to increase the tax, or widen rather the tax bracket. But let's hear your thoughts from a revenue perspective, the work or the task ahead for this government to fund the annual budget, close our budget deficit, and to just get more domestic revenue going.
You see, revenue or tax revenue is a function of the size of the economy. If you grow the economy well, revenue will grow. And in growing the economy, you need to grow investment. So the starting point is to create the environment for investments to grow, be it domestic or foreign. That is very critical to issues of revenue. Secondly, we have a component of revenue that you call independent revenue. I haven't seen the right kind of political will to extract the right kind of value that we can extract in terms of financial resources from those areas. I'm talking about areas like NNPC, areas like NPA, the Nigeria Customs Service, the Central Bank of Nigeria.
In terms of what they remit?
Yes, in terms of what they remit. I mean,
I thought they were revenue-generating agencies already. I mean, don't they?
No. You know, if you look at even, I think, the last budget or the one before, the shortfall under that revenue head was the highest. About 70% shortfall.
From all?
From independent revenue.
Okay.
These are agencies, revenue-generating agencies. You know, I mean, only recently, I think even the president had to even emphasize the fact that there's a need to get these revenue agencies. I mean, imagine, for instance, if NNPC was a private company. Imagine if NIMASA was a private company. Imagine if NPA was private. Imagine the kind of revenue that you can get from all those agencies. So the point I'm making is that we have, you know, pockets of these agencies that have the capacity to bring a lot more into the coffers of government.
If they were privately run, and
if they were privately run, and even if as they are, we have the political will to ensure that they remit what they should remit.
In terms of curbing plug-in leakages?
Leakages, the quality of expenditure, the kind of budget they run. I mean, most of them are just on their own, more or less. So if we do that, I'm sure that we can get a lot more. I mean, imagine if you have a structure that says, okay, the way the FIRS monitors the private company going into your books, you extend the mandate of FIRS to cover some of these institutions.
Kyari,
you get a lot more revenue.
Yes.
Let me bring Kyari. Do you agree?
I agree with what Muda is saying, which is that the efficiency or what are the measures? You know, it's only when you measure something that it gets done. Now, an agency like NPA or any of these parastatals that's supposed to be revenue generating, what are the yardsticks given to them on a year-by-year basis in terms of not just the revenues they should remit, but generally on the management and all of that? If it were to be privately run, then what you find is that it should also have KPIs that it needs to execute. And if it is being done, then you will not see frivolities within the organizations. And therefore more value can be extracted by government from those entities than they currently do. In that case, if it is only 1 trillion or 1.5 trillion that they send every year, if it is well managed, well monitored and measured, it could be twice that amount.
And obviously this speaks to some of the comments that the government has made in the last 4 years about strengthening government institutions. I mean, key to successful government also is strengthening the institutions. Muda, I mean, this is a very good point that you bring out here for these government institutions. Have we done anything? I guess I can take that question back because you just talked about from revenue. If the revenue side is underperforming, obviously there's that speaks to the fact that a lot of work needs to be done. But yes, this 4 years is another opportunity for us to get that right.
Yeah, it's another opportunity to get it right. But we can only get it right if we appreciate the fact that there are gaps to be filled. You know, if you are running a system and you feel that you're already doing it well, and because you are already doing it well, you have been given another mandate. You can as well continue what you are doing. You get the logic.
That is the thinking.
Of course, we can't rule that out. Because if you have a situation where, for instance, I mean, if I'm, pardon me if I keep referring to the CBN. The CBN now is celebrating the method, his approach, the strategy for managing monetary policy. Now we are talking fully now into what the CBN called unconventional monetary policy. That is what is going to continue for the next 4 years. if that is what the government wants. You know?
Because that is
whereas
what seems to have worked for our peculiar situation,
correct,
as it were.
It has worked in court. It has worked in court because what kind of interface do we have between the financial system and the private sector as we speak? It is not just about throwing CBN money at this sector, at that sector, at textile, at rice, and all of that. That is not supposed to be the core issues in monetary policy. It's also about ensuring the right kind of constructive intermediation in the financial sector so that you get a financial sector that works for the economy.
Now, Kyari, let me bring you in here. The CBN always argues that, look, because it's the fallout from the fiscal side. That is why they are forced to play the role many times. They are forced to come up with all these intervention schemes in agriculture, power, everywhere, throwing money at these sectors and just trying to do their best. And I'm just wondering, I mean, for us to have that market-driven economy, allowing market forces to determine everything, where do we start? Is it I get the sense sometimes that, we may not get on that path because we've come to accept this new normal that we're now living?
I hope it is not something that we can live with, the new normal, that is. If one were a cynic, one would think that the central bank and the Ministry of Finance are in different camps, meaning one is on the executive arm, the other may not be. But the thing is that both are part of the executive, and therefore they are supposed to be on the same side. Now, on the independence of the central bank, or the autonomy of the central bank, basically means that the central bank must have some objectives. In Nigeria, it is financial stability. There are two or three actually of the price stability, exchange rate stability, and so whereas in the US, the equivalent has even job growth as part of it. So unemployment rate is also another factor that needs to be looked at in tweaking those monetary tools. Now, for the central bank to go down, and permit me going that low, to be even talking about microfinance banking, we have a major problem. Because if the central bank wants to subsidize lending, let it do so through the commercial banks, and let the subsidy come in one way or the other through some scientific method, whereby if you lend to the agricultural sector, for example, it shouldn't be more than 10% or whatever. Then the central bank could basically, using some mechanisms and some, serious measurement tools, can subsidize that aspect. That way, the banks would still take the risk of lending. Not like, if it is money coming from government, chances are that people might not feel that they're obligated to pay.
Kyari, I must ask you to hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. Muda, thank you for your time so far. We'll come back and continue from where we left off. I've been speaking to Muda Yusuf. He's the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Kyari, Bukar, former Chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. If you're just joining us, we are looking at what Nigerians expect from the next 4 years from the President Buhari government. Now, my guests are Muda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also with me today is Kyari, Bukar, is a former chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Gentlemen, thank you for your time so far. Muda, let me start. Let's speak up with you. Agriculture, that is a sector that has been a prime focus of this administration, giving farmers a boost, fertilizers, credits at affordable rates, lending rates, etc. And we've seen, relatively good performance from that sector. And from a jobs perspective also, the numbers are mixed, I guess, depending on who you ask in terms of how to, evaluate those numbers. But let me hear your perspective, the growth of the agriculture sector in the last 4 years, and this sector as key, in creating jobs.
First of all, the security situation has a major effect on agriculture. Although it may not be reflecting now in the numbers, I don't know why. But I know that the security situation is actually ravaging all the many agricultural communities, particularly in the northern part of the country. So that is one big issue. Because if you have a situation where those who are supposed to be on the farms are now in the IDP camps and all of that, that is a major problem that we need to deal with. So if we are talking about agriculture, no matter what policies we deploy, if we don't ensure that the farmer has the confidence to go to the farm and not worry about kidnapping or banditry or terrorists or all of that, we cannot make much progress as far as agricultural transformation is concerned. Secondly, we need to also recognize that there are some things that you have to do in an integrated manner. If you are talking about agriculture, you cannot talk about growing or developing agriculture in isolation or developing infrastructure or developing even the industry that will process these things. Because the whole thing about agriculture is about developing the value chain itself.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just throw money at maybe a rice farmer or a cassava farmer and all of that. At the end of the day, the man is facing a lot of harvest. He doesn't know what to do with it. You'll be shocked at how ridiculous the farm gate prices are during harvest seasons. They are so ridiculous that they don't even make economic sense. All this because the window to move these products either from the primary level to the processing or to even connect those products to the market is a very big issue.
But would you
so
say
we have to come up.
Okay, so there haven't been policies targeted at.
It has to be integrated. Our approach to dealing with agriculture has to be an integrated approach. Because you can't say you want to develop agric if you don't have the processing to support it, if you don't have the storage to support it, if you don't have the transportation to move the product from the farms to the market. Okay. All those things are critical. So when we are talking about agri, it's not enough for the agric minister to just work and say, okay, you are giving so much money, the harvest is so much. What happens after that?
Well, that is a good question. Kyari, let me bring you in here. I mean, I've had agric experts talk to me about private investments in processing and storage, especially cold storage facilities, how we move our products, especially from the northern part of the country, perishables like tomatoes, how we move them down to other parts of the country. And this is something we've talked about for decades. I'm just wondering, what is preventing investments, private investments from going into that space?
For lack of a better word, it's the state of the infrastructure. And infrastructure here, I mean, but what I mean by infrastructure is in quotation marks. It's not just the physical infrastructure, but there are certain things that actually talk to the agric value chain. One is, of course, naturally the input to the agric value chain is the farms. So we need to have our farmers educated, enlightened, and use the technology that is available for them to raise their yield. That way they can grow more food on the same amount of land. Then the second thing is that once they grow that harvest, there need to be uptakers. And the uptakers can be by means of having the proper storage, silos, so that there would be a processing, semi-processing of one kind, drying if it is grains, and so on and so forth. And then to really complement that value chain and make it such that private sectors can come in large droves, not just for farming, but be part of that ecosystem or economic value chain, is to establish what I've been involved in one or two so far, commodities exchanges. And then the infrastructure around those commodities exchanges, and those are the warehouses, the assaying, the quality assurance, the inspections. It creates a lot of jobs, and not only are they creating jobs that are farm hands, but they are also quality assurance person, assaying. It's high-paying jobs, really. And that way, once you have the proper clusters of farming communities, it will actually encourage young people to stay in those communities rather than come to Lagos or go to Abuja. So
you do not see the Ministry of Agri, the ministry in charge of this?
There is no coordination, exactly. So it is not just the job of Ministry of Agri, it is Agric, the Trade and Investment, the Finance Ministry. Everybody need to be there, even labor, because you need proper skills for you to have the know-how to be in that ecosystem. Otherwise, it would be a foreign person that would come in and sit in the warehouses as warehouse manager or a quality assurance person.
Well, let's quickly talk about the manufacturing sector. I mean, as head of the LCCI, I mean, you have a lot of your members who are, across working or doing business across the sector, especially in the manufacturing sector. I know that, I mean, from time to time we get to see the PMI and what the purchasing managers have to say in terms of volumes, in terms of job creation, and just basically how the sector is doing from month to month or perhaps quarter to quarter. And looking from that of the the Central Bank of Nigeria and one or two banks, most times I get the sense that there is growth, especially maybe from orders, maybe sometimes employment, etc. But you obviously have a better view on that in terms of
yes, there is. There has been some improvement in the in the manufacturing sector, particularly that component of manufacturing that has a large dose of backward integration. Because one of the biggest headaches of our manufacturing sector, or one of our biggest shortcomings, is the high import-dependent nature of the manufacturing sector. Some of them are so heavily import-dependent, sometimes up to 70%, 80% for their imports. So that is why each time there is an issue with Forex, it creates a lot of distortion, dislocations.
And this did not change at all in the last 4 years?
It hasn't changed significantly. Yeah. But if we talk of performance, those of them that has high local value addition are doing much better than those that are also heavily import dependent, because the exchange rate situation penalizes more the components or the segments of manufacturing that are heavily import dependent.
Okay, so for this next 4 years, what is that extra push, nudge that could,
well,
move the needle for them?
Of course, it is about infrastructure, because infrastructure is still a big issue for the manufacturing sector. The amount they spend on power, buying of diesel and sometimes gas and all of that. So that is a major issue. Secondly is the issue of local patronage, particularly from government agencies. We believe that can also make a whole lot of difference, to the manufacturing sector. Because it is not often easy, because of the cost profile of domestic production. It's not often easy, to compel the average consumer to say, go and buy what is made in Nigeria. Because first and foremost, they think of what they can afford. And most times, because the market is flooded with all sorts of imported items, it creates problems for the Nigerian manufacturing sector. So patronage by government agencies, and we have had executive orders in that respect. But implementation has been a major problem.
Okay. We have about 4 minutes left, surprisingly. Let's quickly talk about one very important sector, Kyari, power. What do I say about power? We've said so much. Sometimes, we cannot say too much about power. But obviously, it's key. If we get power going, our industries work, so many other things work. Kyari, speak to the privatization. What should be different in the next 4 years? A number of IPP projects, private sector money has come into the sector, but I don't know, what else do we need to get this going?
Power is the most powerful factor in any nation's economic development, and the attention that it had so far gotten is less than optimal. I think one of the key things that we need to have done in the first place is that during that privatization of the discourse, we should have done something that requires a take-back clause or whatever. If you are not investing, if you acquire it and you don't have the power to, or you don't have the resources to invest further, you need to be penalized. I don't know how the penalty would be. But, or the other option was for it to be listed, those discos. If they were to come to the market and raise, then there would be a requirement for good governance. We would see their books on a quarter-by-quarter basis. We would actually, if people decide that they need to invest, then there is an avenue for for those entities to raise money. Now, that's, that's the past. It has happened. What the government needs to do is to ensure that bring in all the players. Because the key, if I am going to invest in the power sector now in Nigeria, I would invest in the generation. Because if I generate, I am assured of income. Because as long as my power is leaving the plant, I will get a check. And it doesn't matter whether it has reached you and I in our homes or not. But the last mile is the most important. It doesn't matter. So the important thing is that transmission element and then the distribution element. Now, the generation is semi-private, the distribution is private, the middle thing, the transmission, is government-owned, and nobody is keeping them to tasks as to what they are doing. I do know for certain that they have done some massive investments. That's TCN. Yeah. I do had an opportunity of during my days in NESG visited the MD of TCN, and they have shared what the plans were. Very laudable plans. But the problem is that you need that connection to be seamless. Okay. Between the generation, transmission, and ultimately the
I'm afraid we're actually out of time now. I wish we had more time to wrap this up, but just 2 seconds. I mean, are you confident, are you bullish, are you hopeful for the next 4 years in terms of something different happening? Traction, more momentum?
I will give the government another 3 to 4 months, okay. And if things turn out differently, then I would say, yeah, we are going to be different.
Muda?
Well, we have to be prayerfully hopeful.
Prayerfully hopeful, yes. Not cautiously optimistic anymore. Yes. All right, thank you so much for your time on the show today. I appreciate it. I've been speaking to Muda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Kyari, Bukar, former Chairman, Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Esther Awuni. Bye for now.